Hello, I'm Alicia Patel, Head of Media at Charter. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Charter Skills Accelerator on strategic thinking. For those that don't know us, Charter is a future of work, media, and research company. You can read more about us on charterworks.com, and I encourage you to check out Charter Pro, our membership for strategic people leaders. We're proud to host the Charter Skills Accelerator, a workshop series focused on vital skills that will advance your career and help you lead in concert with your values. It is brought to you for free, thanks to the generosity of LifeLabs Learning and BrandLive. Before I hand it over to Justin Shaddix at LifeLabs Learning to lead the workshop, we'll have a brief message from BrandLive.
We're thrilled to sponsor this series with LifeLabs Learning and Charter, and hope that it's a shining example of what's possible. Because let's face it, everyone is bored out of their minds with talking heads and little boxes. At BrandLive, we're injecting a little bit of soul into this thing we're calling hybrid work. Whether it's a webinar series like this one, your biggest marquee event of the year, a new hire onboarding series, or your next town hall. We're reinventing how companies and leaders communicate and teaching them to use video so that these moments look and feel like the television and TikToks we're watching outside of work each and every day. Because the key to making sure your audience doesn't tune out is to make it so good they'll tune in. We hope you enjoyed today's show, and thanks for joining us.
That's a wrap. Nice job, everyone.
Thank you, Sam. Now over to you, Justin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Shaddix. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a leadership trainer and certified executive coach based in New York City, originally from Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am so excited to be with you all here today. Now, the purpose of today's session is to teach us how to be better decision makers, something that actually ends up being pretty difficult for us humans. This is all about maximizing the impact of our work, helping us to avoid costly mistakes like wasted time, wasted energy, wasted money. You're going to leave here today with 5 strategic thinking strategies, really 5 mental models that you can deploy anytime you're having to make a decision, big or small. It's all about helping to maximize the impact of that work and really elevating the thinking of both your own and your team's thinking. And folks, as you saw from those initial stats at the beginning of this presentation, strategic thinking is not just a nice to have, it is a critical must have, especially in today's modern world that is ever changing, increasingly diverse and complex. Now, to get us warmed up today, at LifeLabs, we love to make our workshops practical and useful for you. So if you have the worksheet, there's a prompt at the very top that says, what is a goal that you're currently working on or plan to work on soon? So just want you to take just a minute of reflective thinking time here and think about what is a real goal that I'm currently working on, something that's on my mind. Maybe this is something that you're going to plan to start soon. Maybe it's something that's coming down the road, or maybe you're already in the midst of it. You can still use these checks even if the work has already begun. So just take just a quick minute here and think, what is a goal that I'm currently working towards? Jot a few notes down about what this is, and we're going to be applying our strategies and our checks to this goal today. So I'm going to give you just about 30 more seconds to do that. We're going to have a few moments of reflective thinking today throughout the workshop. I'm a big fan of thinking time. I'm sure many of you appreciate some good thinking time. The goal here is to try out these strategies to actually get a rep with your brain. So you've done a little bit of practice here today. You can take that out, apply it in the real world. All right, so just take 10 more seconds here. All right, everyone got a goal that is top of mind. Even if you don't have a goal right now, as we go throughout the session, I'm sure you're going to get inspired as we go. Now, before I dig into the strategic thinking workshop, I just want to pause to say, hey, who's been here at Life Labs before? If this is your first time, welcome. If you've been with us in the past, it's great to have you here again. We're a learning development training firm. We do trainings for managers, execs, and teams at thousands of orgs all around the world. At this point, we've impacted over 2,000 organizations, and that means over 450,000 learners have benefited from our workshops. Our mission is to teach life's most useful skills that we can learn in the shortest amount of time. They're going to have the biggest impact on our work. We are dedicated to helping improve the quality of our work lives, so helping people be better leaders, better communicators, better collaborators. We've worked with a lot of amazing companies that you see right here on your screen. And what this does, it gives us a unique opportunity to go into the modern workplace and really study what's happening. We also back up our findings with a meta-analysis of large-scale research projects. So in essence, we go out there, we do the heavy lifting for you, we do the research, we validate it, we extract the learnings, and we bring them to you. And that's what we're going to be focusing on here today. Now, before we go any further, I just want to pause and level set what is strategic thinking. If you're here, I'm sure each of you have your own definition of what that means, but really it's about mastering two cognitive habits. First, keeping the future in mind while working in the present. And second, considering all the different complexities of any situation. And this is actually harder to do than you might think. Even the most intelligent people amongst us still can struggle to really truly think strategically. It's really just because of our brains. We often are prone to bias, making assumptions, wrong assumptions. So we've got to actually have a little bit of help and a little bit of structure to truly think strategically. And this might be something that you are really great at, but what about the other folks on your team? So today's about really helping to scale you up, but also giving you vocabulary and models that you can take and teach to your people. So collectively, you're all elevating your thinking and making sure you're maximizing the impact of your work. Now, why is this necessary? Well, a couple of big reasons here. I want you to think for yourself. When was a time that I put hours of effort into some project that never reached fruition? I know I've been many times in my professional life along the way, spent a lot of time doing something, building something, strategizing, making something, and then we never use it. Or it gets changed halfway through. It can be very frustrating. So when we think more strategically, we're avoiding those painful moments where we've wasted that time, we've wasted the human power, we've wasted the money. Also, we want to make sure that we're making the biggest impact from our work. From my observations of teaching hundreds of workshops every year, most of us are pretty busy people. Not a lot of people have a lot of extra free time. So it's about making sure that we maximize that time. And third, in a study that was done on over 10,000 executives, 60,000 managers in over 140 countries, strategic thinking was cited as the number one driver of business success. So this is a place where you can really flex your muscles as a leader and really show that you can help the team to grow. And folks, this is absolutely necessary. I work with all kinds of organizations across industries every single day, and this is something that I still see. Even the best leaders still sometimes make mistakes here. Now, when might you think strategic thinking is necessary? It's actually a trick question. The answer is always. And the models that we're looking at today, you can apply them to both big and small projects. And it's really about daily strategic thinking habits. So this is really a way that you are constantly kind of approaching problems. So this isn't just about big, complex strategic models. This is about really just simple habits, ways of thinking about things to make sure we're making the best decisions. So what are those habits that really matter? And today we're going to give you a condensed version of our strategic thinking workshop. There is a full 2-hour version where we go more into depth, but here is just a chance to give you those models and give you a chance to actually practice them. So let's take a look. Here they are. These are our 5 checks. Take them in. We got the gap check, the lens check, link up, UCK, and inclusive planning. And what I would like for you to do is to consider these to be your pre-flight checklist. So before you hit launch and zoom up into space, you're pausing to say, hey, let me make sure I think through this. So before we ever jump into action, we're going through these different models to make sure we're making the best decisions. And this is both for ourselves and for our team. I'm going to go through each of these today. I'm going to define what they are, explain how they work, teach you the questions that you need to be asking, helping you to build awareness on about when to be asking those questions, and give you a chance to practice them on that goal that you wrote down at the beginning of our workshop. Now, I like to bring a coaching mindset to our sessions. That means I'm going to be asking you some strategic questions along the way. That'll be a chance for you to reflect on what I've shared and to give me some ideas. Also, if you've got questions as we go along, we got Audrey here who's doing the moderator. She's going to be sending messages to me. So if things come up along the way, just let me know and we will tackle those. So let's dive in with our first check. It is the gap check. All right, so the gap check is about beginning with the end in mind. And if you're noticing this incredible tattoo picture here on the side, a hilarious example of someone not really thinking ahead, not really thinking all the way through. So we want to make sure that we are really thinking strategically with our gap check. So what does that mean? Well, we want to define what is our desired state, so whatever goal we're working on, what is our eventual desired state, and what might sound like common sense but not as common practice, also pausing to define our current state. This is one of those steps that people often neglect to take. So we're going to define desired and current state. And to make this truly strategic, we want to quantify both of these. That means we want to be able to apply numbers to them. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but this really makes us try to think more into numbers. Here's an example. I know we've got a lot of people ops people in the room, folks who work in HR. So something you're probably constantly curious about, concerned about, is employee engagement. So let's say that your desired state is to get an 85% engagement rating from your engagement survey, something I'm sure many of you do. However, when we pause to measure where we are currently, we're noticing it's closer to 65%. All right, so we got about a 20% gap there. As you're looking at these numbers and thinking through the gap check, what is useful about putting numbers on the desired and current state? What does that do for us? So this is one of those questions I want you to reflect and type into chat. What is useful about getting these numbers here? Take a moment and think about this. There's multiple reasons why this might be useful. I would say there's at least 4 things that come to mind. What does it help us to do? What does it help us to accomplish? What do you think? Take a moment, collect them. All right, starting to come in now. So I'm hearing from David about benchmarking. Absolutely. Gives you just a numerical perspective. You can measure if you're trying to achieve something. Objective observation. Yes, okay, I love these answers, folks. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So yeah, let's just reiterate. So number 1, an Amy, yes, tracking progress. Kelly allows us to use the gap. Oswaldo, help people understand the needs to be done. Okay, you got it. Okay, folks, I'm loving the strategic thinking skills and you're doing great here. Keep those answers coming. So number 1, it informs our strategy. How big is this bridge that we're building? Is it a small little footpath that we can build relatively quickly? Or is it something large like the Golden Gate Bridge? Second, research shows that when we start to use numbers, they actually boost motivation. People are more motivated to try to reach that goal if they know that it's achievable and they can actually recognize that they're making progress or not. Speaking of progress, like you all mentioned, when we make things quantifiable, we can actually track if we are making that progress. And finally, one of the most important reasons to save us time, energy, and money is the gap check stops us from doing that low value work. What does that mean? Well, an example from Life Labs world, we were in a meeting and someone shared that they noticed there was an uptick in clients canceling last minute. So last minute cancellations for workshops, which can be really stressful. And someone else said, ooh, that's something that I've noticed too. So what happened? People think, oh no, we've got a problem. How do we fix this? So people started thinking about, all right, what are some strategies? What do we need to do? Do we need to change a policy? Thankfully, before we spent too much time trying to solve this problem, someone said, hey, folks, real quick, how about we do a gap check before we really jump into action? So we did a quick gap check, and we realized that for the past 500 workshops, only 2 had a last-minute cancellation. So this was just a cognitive mistake on a human part of just thinking like, oh, I'm seeing a pattern. That must be, we got to do something. But really, when we pause to measure it, we realize we don't actually have to do this. So it can be really helpful just to be able to pause, put some numbers to it, and really inform. Going back to informing strategy, also, so we've got a 20% gap here. So what does that mean? It's like, okay, maybe our strategy to help fix this is Let's find some more in-person connection time. Let's bring people together in the office or have an offsite. Maybe we can drive numbers up that way. Or maybe we're helping to facilitate more connection in general for folks. Or maybe we need to focus on development of some kind. Surely one of those strategies can help us get to that 85%. But let's say, imagine instead that instead of 65, this was more like 40. All right, so even like a bigger gap. That can mean like, hey, we've got a serious problem here. What is going on with engagement? And that can mean that our strategy might be to start with something like a listening tour and really hearing from our people to understand. Conversely, let's imagine instead of 65, this is closer to 75. So meaning that the gap was much smaller. So that could tell us, all right, so maybe we don't need to do that elaborate planning. Maybe it's just about finding small ways to tweak engagement. But we won't know any of that. We won't be able to truly decide on a plan of action until we pause to measure this. And there we go. That is the wonderful gap check. Let me give you a chance to reflect on this. So returning to the goal that you jotted down at the beginning of our session, I want you to take a moment and answer these 3 questions. Number 1, what is your desired state? How do you make that measurable? Number 2, what is your current state? And also, how might you measure that? And if you don't immediately know how to measure it, what are some ideas you might have? And third, lead indicator. So we also were talking about lead and lag indicators. Lag indicators are things that we're measuring at the end of a process. The problem with only measuring lag indicators is it's too late to do anything if we're only measuring those. So we want some lead indicators. These are indicators, things that we are measuring earlier in a process that's helping us to make sure that we're actually on track. So what might be one metrics that you could use as a lead indicator here? And just to kind of flesh this out a bit more, I feel like examples are really helpful in this workshop. A funny example of a lead indicator, let's say you're in an airplane flying to an airport, you land at the airport, and only when you land, you realize, oops, we're at the wrong airport. So that would be your lag indicator. But back up in the air, the plane has lots of instruments to measure, are we on course or not? So our GPS telling us, oh yes, we are on course, or you know what? We need to change course by 2 degrees to make sure we actually end up at that right airport. So the lead indicator is what we're measuring earlier in the process to make sure we actually land at the right place. I'm going to give you 2 solid minutes to do this cognitive work right now. So desired state, current state, and what's at least one idea you have for a lead indicator. So go ahead, jot these thoughts down. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And also, if you have any questions that come up, let me know while you work. All right, take 30 more seconds here. All right, I know you could probably spend more time thinking about this. In our full version of the workshop, we actually get into small groups and actually discuss this with each other. People often find it's helpful to get another person's perspective on this. For the sake of our time today, I'm going to keep us moving here, but feel free to return to this afterwards. So that is check number 1, the gap check, really essence of data-driven decision making. Let's move on now to the second check, which is the lens check. And this is our root cause analysis. So why does that gap exist in the first place? The lens check is really helpful because we are prone to bias and making wrong assumptions. And we often come to a conclusion that is not correct. And if we're coming to wrong conclusions, we're not able to create the best plans of action. So here's an example. Let's play with this one. All right, so you created a new role on your team. And the goal for that role is to have somebody in it for 2 years. You want them to be in that role for 2 years. which actually seems like a big ask in this day and age, I feel. Now, currently, 3 people have failed in this role. Nobody's even made it to the 1-year mark yet. So what does that mean? Well, oftentimes our go-to lens is to blame those 3 people. And they say, they suck. They're the problem. We call this our fundamental attribution error, which means we have a tendency to attribute something fundamental about someone based on a behavior that we see. A classic example here is you're driving down the road, somebody cuts you off. What is the first thing that comes to mind? How angry you are, what an awful driver this person is. You can't believe they've been given a license. They'll just give anybody a license these days, right? We get infuriated. So we think they're a terrible person, a terrible driver, just because, oops, they cut us off. Now let's reverse it. Let's imagine you're the one who accidentally cut someone off. And it doesn't mean you're a terrible person, a terrible driver. Could just mean you are a little bit lost, or you're in a rush, or maybe you're a chihuahua, knocked over your latte. Who knows? A lot of very valid reasons why you might accidentally do that. But it's not that you were a terrible person. It's just some little accident happened. The 3 lens model here is designed to help us really think through the problem so we don't succumb to these wrong assumptions and make the wrong diagnosis. So the first lens is we'll focus on these people, right? So who are these 3 people? Did they have the skill to be successful in the role? Did they have the willpower? So thinking through things on that level. But we don't want to stop there. We want to expand. So I want to go up to the next level and think, all right, on a manager level, how might I be contributing to this? What might be going on with leadership? What are they doing or not doing that might lead to people leaving in the role? Here are a few ideas. Were you clear on setting expectations? Did people get feedback they needed to adjust, reinforcing positive behaviors, course correcting on ones that weren't so great? Did you hold people accountable to their decisions, to their action items? Did you get recognition for folks? Do they feel acknowledged and appreciated? Employees are 3 times more likely to leave an organization if they don't feel appreciated. And how about priorities? They know what to focus on. So any number of reasons why. All right, so we started with a person. We thought about what might be doing on a manager level. But again, we want to go up one more level here. And the final level is the company level. All right, now this is where I want to hear your thoughts. What might be going on at a company level that could lead to these 3 people leaving the organization, so not being successful in this role? What might be going on a company level? Reflect, type into chat. What are your ideas here? If you're doing a 3-lens model check, trying to assess things on a company level, what might be going on at that org level to contribute to people leaving an organization? I can think of at least 2 or 3 different reasons. Let's see, the company may not speak up culture where employees feel like they can be voiced, right? So I've got a problem, but I don't feel like I can actually share it. Yeah, poor culture in general. Maybe leadership isn't so great. Yeah. Lack of clear vision, purpose, and goals. Yes, when we have clear purpose, clear goals, people are much more likely to stick around and feel engaged. So yeah, toxic culture, lack of resources, lack of direction. Yeah, maybe the pay wasn't good, benefits were good. You're not as competitive with other organizations. All right, fantastic. Misplaced priorities. All right, I love it. Yes, I love the ideas here. Yeah, all those reasons. So values, culture, systems, constraints, any number of things that could lead to people leaving. And the value of doing this thinking, folks, is really trying to nudge ourselves to this multivariate thinking. And this goes back to that second quality. What is strategic thinking? It's about thinking about the future while working in the present and considering all the complexities of a situation, which is a big ask, especially if we're busy juggling multiple priorities, rushing around. It's easy to succumb to making the wrong assumption, to really diagnosing things in the incorrect way. And the problem with that is if we diagnose it wrong, the treatment we apply is also probably going to be wrong. So the 3-lens model is helping you to zoom out and really examine things from multiple perspectives to make sure we truly diagnose, why does this gap exist? And folks, you can use this both for problems and for successes. Let's say you have a good success. Let's say from my world, all right, I teach an amazing workshop. People have a great experience, get great feedback. And I'm like, yes, all right, let me pause. Justin, what led to that success? So I could be like, oh, it's definitely me. I'm amazing, right? Well, maybe, but let's zoom out. Could be about the people. Maybe it was the participants. Maybe they showed up eager to learn, excited to learn. They wanted to look good in front of each other. So maybe that was really what contributed to the success. Or it could be just about the topic, the content. Maybe it was really timely for them. Maybe it's exactly what they needed and wanted to hear at that time. So maybe it could have been administered by any number of facilitators. So it's not really about me. It could have been just the content itself. When I'm able to do that kind of check on myself, I'm like, all right, what really led to this success? Let me really understand how I was successful today. So once I understand that, then I can replicate it going forward. So they can apply this both with things that aren't going well or things that did go well, really diagnosing what went down. And that's the lens check. One of the best ways to learn is by taking your turn. So I want you to play with the lens check here. I want you to apply it to that goal that you've been working on. Why does that gap exist for you? Now, the labels of your lenses might change. We have usually what we see that works well is sort of the intrapersonal, like an individual, interpersonal, between people, and then the overall environment that they all exist within. That's one example of how your lenses might work. Yours might be a little bit different depending on what your goal is, what you're working with here. But just take 1 minute and think through things from different perspectives, different levels. See what you come up with. And also, if anybody has any questions while you're working here, feel free to send those over. All right, take just 10 more seconds here. And again, I acknowledge your brain is probably hungry to dig deeper into this. I know when I want to pause to do these checks, I really want to make sure I have that cognitive time to do it. So I encourage you to continue this outside of today. But for the sake of time, I'm going to keep us bumping here. So boom, gap check, check, lens check, yes. Now let's move on to our third check. It is the link up check. And folks, this is the place where strategic thinking often starts to break down. So here we go. In an ideal world, we start with a gap check, we follow it up with a lens check, and we devise our plan to actually achieve our goal, right? And I love it when it's like a nice, clear goal that'll inform our strategy, that informs our individual tactics. And it's nice top, bottom, it's beautiful, it all flows together, and we love it, right? But we don't live in the ideal world, do we? No, it's more likely often like this, is we start with some kind of tactic. Maybe somebody's excited about something. Maybe there's a new platform or new tool, and we jump right into work. And somewhere along the way, we lose track about why we're doing it this way. And I know I've been in this position many times. Years ago, I was delegated a task to create some client case studies, and I spent about a month collecting examples, writing copy, pulling images, doing formatting, really stretching my design skills to create these case studies. They were beautiful at the end of it, but guess what? They never saw the light of day because no one did a link up check. Someone had the idea, let's make some case studies. They had this vague notion that it linked up to marketing and business building, but we really didn't think through how we were going to utilize them. And so we really didn't know how to execute on them. So as a result, I spent all this time that was wasted. So wasted hours, wasted energy, and I felt really frustrated afterwards. Now, if I could go back in time to that, the question I would have asked is, what does this link up to? So this is the kind of question you want to be asking is, what does it link up to? And this is great because you can use this whether you've been delegated something to you. So you're going to do some managing up. You can say, hey, so I can execute in the best way possible. What does this project or task link up to? If that's not clear, asking for it. Or if you got somebody on your team who's got a new idea for some new initiative or new strategy, whatever it might be, to ask them, all right, this sounds great. You can validate it, but tell me, what do you see this linking up to? How does this link up to our team purpose or our team goals or the organizational goals? So just pausing to ask a question like that, make sure that the energy, the effort, whatever we're about to work on is actually making sense in the larger ecosystem of our organization. Let's flesh this out a bit more. So here's an example. Let's say that you want to do a company-wide hackathon, something that's really fun, can have a lot of benefits. We did one at Life Labs about a year ago. So what's the link up? What does the hackathon link up to? Well, one option is it helps strengthen our cross-functional collaboration. So it's helping us to be more connected as an organization. And what is that linking up to? Well, increasing our employee retention. So beautiful, like all these things, they all link up in a nice, smooth way. So I understand how my piece makes sense, gives me more meaning, more purpose in the work that I do. But let's say we want to double check on this. All right. So one of the benefits of a link up check is checking for alignment. So it's like, all right, are we aligned on this plan? So look up on the screen here is one method here is we're doing the hackathon to increase connection, to increase retention. But another strategy and goal could be that we want to increase company revenue by developing new services, new products, and utilizing the hackathon as a place to develop those products. If that is really our goal, that's probably going to change how we form these hackathon groups. If it's just about team connection, we might want to really have a diversity in our groups. So people from different departments coming together. So have that cross-functional collaboration. But if this is really about getting a great output, so actually new products, new services, whatever it might be, we want to be more strategic in who we're putting on those teams, making sure the teams are balanced, making sure that you have the right kind of decision makers and performers there. Another example of this might be, is it checks to make sure, is this the most effective way to go about this? So the link up helps us to pause and say, all right, the hackathon is one way to help us achieve that cross-functional connection, but there could be many other ways to achieve that. Let me ask you all, what are some other connection building alternatives? So instead of a hackathon as our tactic, what is another tactic that we could use to increase that connection in the org and increasing employee retention? Type this into chat. This is something you're probably great at. You're probably thinking about this all the time. I'm sure you've done a lot of this work in the past. So what are some other tactics that would help increase connection across the organization? I'm seeing from Amy, cross-functional scavenger hunts. Yes, I have not done that, but I want to do that. Random lunches, right? I love it. Random lunches, we got to eat. Let's make it random. Cross-team mentoring circles. I love that idea. Yeah. Volunteering. Yes. Having a recognition program, recognizing events. Yeah. People who feel appreciated, more likely to stick around. The random coffee. So we're doing random lunches, random coffee. People love the randomness. Sign to surprise magnifies emotion by about 400%. Cohort style L&D programs. I love it. Cross-functional sharing knowledge meetings. All right. So yes. So great. So a lot of different ideas here. So the link up check gives us that time and space to pause and say, hey, are we aligned around what we're doing? Is this the most effective way for us to do this? What else might we try? Instead of just saying, hey, here's the plan, which I know might sound silly, but from my experience, when we got busy days, when we got competing priorities, when we have the pressure of deadlines, we don't always pause to actually do this thinking. And as a result, we make decisions and we jump into action. And only once we start moving down that path, we realize this wasn't the best path. The link up check is here to actually help us. So the question we're asking is, what does it link up to? And we're doing this anytime we're starting to figure out our tactics, strategies, and how those link up to our goal. So there we go. That's the link up. And so far, I haven't seen any questions come through, but if any questions do come, folks, just send them my way. So we got 3 checks down. We got 2 more to go. Number 4 is the UCK check. And that's helping us prevent ucky things from happening. What does UCK actually stand for? Well, it stands for unattended consequences. And this is about pausing to help us think, what might be the unintended consequences of our plan, of our action? If we actually reach the end, it could be good, or what else might come up out of it. All right, I'm seeing some chats here now. Should this be a link down, meaning should we first identify what we are solving for? Okay, that's a great question. So just want to pause here. We're going back to the link up just for one quick sec. It can be from top down or it could be from bottom up. Honestly, and if you're able to do both of those, it shows that you really understand what the link is. So the link up could really go in either direction. How I see it most commonly used is anytime anybody has a new initiative or a new strategy, a new idea, just pausing to say, great, what is this actually linking up to? What is this helping us to achieve? So usually that's linking up to some kind of ultimate organizational goal. So great question there. All right, let's go back to the UCks. So UCK, check. I'm giving you an example from the world of ecology. Back in the 1800s, farmers on the big island of Hawaii had a problem. Rats that had been imported on visiting ships were devouring crops, a lot of crop loss. So what did they do? They said, what eats a rat? I know, the noble mongoose. So farmers imported a bunch of invasive mongoose. Now, the mongoose did indeed take care of the rats. But what do you think? What else? What do you think happened next? They brought in mongoose. By the way, mongoose, mongoose, both of them I think are correct. I've looked this up. What do you think happened afterwards? So the mongoose took care of the rats, but then what happened? Yeah, I'm seeing that there was no natural predators for the mongoose. That's right. So the mongoose stuck around, and not only did they eat the rats, but they also ate birds and insects, crucial pollinators for the crops. So what ended up happening is there ended up being more crop loss, right? Yep, they ate the other birds, killed snakes and other animals. Yeah, mongoose infestation. Yeah. So there ended up being more crop loss because of a loss of the pollinators. So the farmers ended up actually losing more. And to this day, Hawaii still deals with the mongoose invasion problem. So let us not fall into this trap. Now, one of the things we do in our workshop is we do some rapid fire checking where we present things like what might be the unintended consequences of no meeting Fridays or having a 4-day work week, things that can sound really good on the surface, but if we pause to really reflect on that, we're like, you know what? And this is what I want to emphasize is just because you come up with an unintended consequence doesn't mean you have to scrap your plan. It's just a sign that, something might come up. And we're going to use that insight to actually help us shift our plan a little bit to make sure it actually reaches a good outcome. Something we talk about in the workshop is doing pre-mortems. I'm just going to touch on that briefly here. You're probably familiar with post-mortems, the idea that at the end of a project, we do a retrospective, look back and think, all right, how did it go? What went well? What didn't go so well? What led to that? A pre-mortem is doing this type of thinking, but before we ever jump into action. So we've planned out our plan of action. We've done our link up so we know what we're going to be doing. And then we sit down with our team and say, all right, what might be some of the unintended consequences? We generate those ideas and we say, okay, based on that, what could we do differently to make sure we overcome, to make sure we mitigate those problems? So it actually becomes a fun, creative exercise that shows that we're committed to our project success by naming what might come up and then finding ways to overcome that. And again, this sounds like, oh yeah, great idea, sounds so obvious. But in practice, people are often too busy. There's too many deadlines and pressures. And so we just jump into action and start going and don't really pause to think about this. So this is a really important one to say, hey, before we take an action, what might be the UCks of this situation? All right, try this out. See what comes up here. So going back to your goal, I want you to imagine you're able to reach success. You achieve what you want to achieve. But what might be the unintended consequences of doing that? And then based on that insight, how might you modify your plan so that you can overcome those? I'm going to give you 2 minutes to reflect on this. Let me know if you have any questions. And I'm seeing the chat here. I would imagine this gives a great invitation to be skeptical. Yes, Lauren, absolutely. So a check does give us permission to actually poke holes in things. Another term for this is like red teaming. It's actually a tactic used to help create productive conflict in teams. And it says, hey, let's imagine, have permission, what might go wrong here. And it helps us to actually do it. And this is helping to overcome our positivity bias, which means we are more likely to just say, I'm sure, or optimism bias, which is like, I'm sure that everything is going to work out, and really only noticing and thinking about all the things that confirm that. All right, take just 30 more seconds here. Reflect on your UX. All right, folks, we got 4 down. We got 1 more to go. Our final strategic thinking check, again, these are our mental models. These are our daily habits that we are deploying whenever we're having to make a decision to ensure that we're overcoming our bias, overcoming our shortcomings, and making sure we're making the best decisions possible. I'm just checking over here in the chat. I'm realizing that an UC for me might be getting some criticism, and that has constrained me from wanting to work on my project. Ooh, Susan, that sounds like a great insight. So it's like, hey, I want to avoid that criticism. So it's like, hey, based on that, I wonder what your next step might be. So helping you to actually, like, at least having that insight, that awareness. Great. Awareness is often the very first critical step. So now that we have that, what do I want to do? All right, let's talk about inclusive planning here. So one of the biggest, actually the biggest predictor of a project failing is not including the right people at the right time. And I imagine if I could see all of your faces right now, I'd see a lot of those knowing smiles and those head nods, right? Yes, you've been here. You've done this before. You've been the person who got left out, or maybe you've been the decision maker who forgot to include the team or the people who needed to be included. It's a very common mistake. That's why it's one of our checks, and it's here to prevent that very painful and potentially costly mistake from happening. How do we do an inclusive planning check? Here's one version. Is first, whatever project or goals you're working on, to divide that up into its different project phases. There's a lot of different forms this can take. Here is one of the most common ones. By no means is it the only one, but what you're seeing here on the screen is phase 1, we're defining the goal. So that could be our gap check. Phase 2 is analyzing the problem. This is kind of our lens check, what's really going on here. Phase 3 is brainstorming solutions. Phase 4, picking those solutions. So also thinking about our unintended consequences for those. And then finally, executing. So you think about our project phases. We're also thinking about who needs to be involved. Now, this can be individuals. It also could be entire teams. Here's one version of our plan. Look this over. What do you notice? What might be problematic about this current plan? Share this with me in the chat. And I see at least 1, 2, 3, 4. I see at least 4 potential problems with this plan. What do you see? All right, from Natalia, you can't brainstorm alone. Absolutely, right? Brainstorming is about bringing a diversity of perspectives and ideas together. And it's great when we have that diversity. So brainstorming alone is more like a brain trickle. I don't know. It's not really a whole storm, not a storm yet. What else are we seeing? Oh my gosh, classic. Yes. So there is no involvement. That other team, those poor other team, they're only getting involved at the last stage. If you've ever been that other team, you probably get really pissed off at that. That can be a huge mistake. And that probably what the other team is going to be saying, hey, you should have done this, or you should have asked me. I could have told you to do it this way. We want to avoid that. What else am I seeing here? Way more folks involved in defining the goal. Exactly. Yeah. Only you alone defining the goal. I'd at least bring your manager on to help us with that. What else I'm noticing? Not involving the other team. Everybody got a lot of empathy for the other team. Yes. Fantastic. And then, yeah, burnout on you. So you're the one who's really carrying a lot of these phases all by yourself. So let's upgrade it. What might be a second option here? Boom. So just like you're saying, let's bring the manager on to help you define the goal. Great. Just having someone else's perspective can be so helpful there. Everybody is involved in the brainstorm. We're including the other team much earlier in the process, which is so essential. It's unbelievable how often, though, we don't include that other team. We just think, oh, they're going to execute. We'll bring them in when they need to be brought in. But no, bring them in earlier. Hear from them. At least let them share. If they're going to be working on it, let them share what they are ideas they have, or the issues they might have, or limiting beliefs. Just go ahead and source that information. Another thing we did is in the picking solutions, we made that a little more simple. If there's not really clear criteria, we've got multiple people picking solutions, it could be a little bit more time consuming. So potentially maybe just make that one person make it you. But there you go. And again, I know on the surface, this is like, Justin, so obvious. I would never make this mistake. It happens all the time, folks. Even as somebody who teaches this on a regular basis, I find myself feeling like there's not enough time to think strategically. I've got to go and jump into action. But it's like, wait, pause, take 2 minutes just to think this through. And because we're prone to bias, you've got to actually have some structure to nudge you to think things in a more complex way. The good news is strategic thinking is an absolutely learnable skill, but it does take intentionality and it takes effort. Behavior change does not just happen because you want it to. You actually got to put in the effort to build those muscles. I'm seeing here in the chat, with the understanding that phase 4 is picking between feasible solutions as having been defined by the team and others. Hear that? Yep. Making sure that totally makes sense. All right. Boom, boom, boom. Try this out for yourself, folks. Thinking about your goal, thinking about the plan of action you want to put into play, who needs to be included, and at what phase do you want to include them? Save yourself and other people a lot of pain here by doing this thinking now. I'm going to give you just about a minute to pull your thoughts together. All right, take just 10 more seconds here. And just to build a little bit more on this inclusive planning check, something that I found to be really helpful for me is when anytime I'm making these kind of decisions, even when I use these models myself, just running this by someone on my team, just getting another human being to check my checks. It's amazing how just having someone else's perspective, just how, wherever their mind is that day, they can kind of maybe see the gaps that I've left or kind of see my own cognitive shortcomings, just help me able to see things in a more holistic point of view. So with all of these, it's great to do them solo, but also use these with your team. One of the goals of this workshop is to increase your conversational capacity to talk in more strategic language. So using these 5 checks as a universal way to talk about how we make better decisions. And there we go, my friends. Those are our 5 checks. I know that was pretty rapid fire. Now I'm curious, which one of these do you want to practice after today? If you had to choose one to take out of this workshop and deploy with your team, which one would it be? It's important that you choose just really one. Start small. Behavior change, as I said, takes time and effort. If you try to do too much at once, you're likely to kind of get yourself burnt out and then you won't do any of them. So if you were to choose one check to actually practice, which one would it be? We're going to launch a little poll here. And I'm curious to hear what's landing, what's sticking with you. My goal, my hope is that whichever one that you choose, you'll go out there and practice it immediately. Skills become habits through deliberate practice. So this is something that you want to take and actually start to flex that muscle, which at the beginning may feel like you got to overcome some inertia. But once you start doing it, the more that you practice it, the more you're familiar it's going to be. All right, here comes some results I'm seeing. So we got inclusive planning check, link up, lens, UCK, lens, link up. So get a diversity of checks. Love it. Okay. Folks, whatever you chose, go out there, teach this to your team, teach this to your manager. A great way to reinforce the learning in your own brain is actually teaching it to someone else, because you've got to be able to explain it in a way that makes sense. So teach it to somebody. Increase the conversational capacity of your team to talk about things more strategically. Get a rep and practice this. Use the vocabulary. Hey, let's do a quick gap check, or what does this link up to? Asking these simple questions at these critical moments can make all the difference in our decision making. So sometimes just spending a minute or two reflecting on this can save us a ton of time, a ton of energy, a ton of pain. All right, I'm getting the results. Here we go. Fantastic. All right, everyone. We are right at 51 here. We're going to do a little bit of sign out stuff in just a second here. We're going to bring up Alicia in just a second. But before we do, please just take a moment and tell us your thoughts on today's session. We love to hear your feedback. The things that people share with us here are things that we really take to heart. We really use them to adapt and change our programs. So you can scan this QR code that you see here on the screen. Also, you can go to that URL that you see up there. The survey only takes about 90 seconds to do. We do review each and every one of your comments. So thank you for taking the time to fill this out. And while you do, I'm checking in on the results of our poll. So we got a pretty even split here. It looks like link up and inclusive planning are number one, gap check coming in after that, and then lens and UCK coming in a little bit less. So link up, inclusive planning are the biggest ones. Cool, cool, cool. I love those two. Those are so useful. All right, I'll give you just about one more minute for this survey, and then we'll bring Alicia back up here. All right, I'm getting an updated number here. It looks like the link up check was the winner at 38% of people. Fantastic. Whatever you chose, go out there, make that a habit, improve the thinking of your and your team's thinking. And that is all from me, everyone. It's been a joy. I hope that you've gotten something useful, something fun out of today's session, and I will see you again whenever our paths cross. Until then, folks, and I will pass it back now to Alicia.
Thank you, Justin. And thank you all for taking the time to join us today and for participating so actively. I hope you found the session as useful as I did. I'll personally be putting the lineup check to use later today in a meeting. Please do remember to fill out that feedback survey if you haven't already. We take your input very seriously. And before we close, I just want to remind you that the next Charter Skills Accelerator with Life Labs Learning Again on rapid trust skills will take place on June 21st. Back here on BrandLive's platform. If you enjoyed today and missed any past sessions, you can view them on BrandLive as well. And lastly, I just want to thank Justin at Life Labs Learning once again, and thank you to Sam and the team at BrandLive. See you next time.